I knew something was off the second Grant Delaney swaggered into the Q3 review meeting like he just walked off a TED Talk stage no one asked for. Tan too orange. Watch too loud. Ty screaming, "My dad's money still pays my rent." He hadn't been here 6 weeks and already he was slashing line items like a toddler with scissors. Operational bloat, he called it. Legacy inefficiencies. You could practically see the bloodlust in his PowerPoint transitions. And then like clockwork he looked straight at Nathan Cole. Quiet, loyal Nathan, who hadn't missed a system milestone in 10 years and said, "This bonus here? Barely a rounding error." Laughter. One of the younger finance bros actually snorted into his LaCroix. Nathan didn't flinch. He just sat there, eyes steady, fingers folded on a legal pad he never once opened. Grant moved on, bragging about how the reallocation of dormant departmental funds had allowed him to boost Q4 bonus pools for top-tier leadership. What he didn't mention was that those dormant funds came from Nathan's budget, quietly gutted after his team was downsized post-reorg. The same budget Nathan had kept lean on purpose year after year because he knew what was coming, knew what was owed, knew what was written down to the semicolon, in a contract no one else at that table had probably ever seen. Now listen, if you're already feeling the fire building, do us a solid. 97% of people hear these stories and never hit subscribe or like. If you want more cold-blooded stories like this one, that's the best way to support the team that brings M to life. Anyway, Grant was too busy preening to notice the flicker in Nathan's eyes. It lasted maybe half a breath. But I caught it. I always do. I've worked with Nathan for 13 years. He built the operations risk mitigation framework from scratch when most of these guys were still figuring out how to mute themselves on Zoom. I was there when the board offered deferred compensation bonds during the liquidity crisis of 2013. Most execs laughed, said, "Too risky." But not Nathan. He read every line. And when legal warned the bond would only vest if his infrastructure held 99.98% uptime for a decade, he just said, "That's the point." People forget the things that don't scream for attention. They forgot about the bond. They forgot about Nathan. But I didn't. And he sure as hell didn't forget them. After the meeting, Grant strutted out like a rooster in a henhouse, clapping shoulders and throwing around words like lean synergy and profit optimization. Meanwhile, Nathan walked past me, calm as a monk, holding a manila folder that hadn't left his side in years. He nodded once, said, "Nice weather for a payout, don't you think?" I blinked. What kind of payout? He just smiled. The kind they'll feel in their bones. I found out later that the legacy bond, his bond, was set to mature in exactly 14 days. Not a stock. Not an option. A hardwired financial contract tied to system stability metrics only Nathan had access to. And per Clause 18b, the one no one had read in a decade, it had to be honored before any discretionary distributions could be made. In 2 weeks, that so-called rounding error was going to eat the entire executive bonus pool alive. Starting with Grant Delaney's. In 2013, we were one domino away from folding. That year's supply chain crisis had our entire ops back-end gasping for air, vendors vanishing overnight, inventory stranded on ships nobody could unload, and internal systems so brittle a server hiccup could have sparked a meltdown. Half the board was in Europe, and the other half was sobbing over earnings calls. Meanwhile, Nathan was in the basement server room, sleeves rolled up, tracing power fluctuations like a surgeon with a stethoscope. No one knew it then, but the operations risk mitigation framework he drafted in those weeks would save the company twice, once from collapse and once from its own hubris. Back then, the CFO, a jittery man who always smelled like metal polish, pitched a plan: freeze cash bonuses, offer performance-tied debt instruments instead. High risk, long term, he muttered, like even saying it too loud would break the company in half. Most of the execs passed, called it monopoly money. It'll never vest, legal said. Metrics are near impossible. 99.98% uptime for a decade? In this market. But Nathan wasn't guessing. He wasn't hoping. He knew his system. He'd already built the redundancies, the failovers, the silent scripts that self-corrected glitches before they tripped alarms. I watched him sign the bond paperwork with a ballpoint pen that looked older than our HR director. His only question was, "Where's the clause about disbursement order?" The lawyer blinked. Why? He just smiled. I like things tidy. The clause was buried, of course, 18b. Stated in clean legalese that any matured, performance-based debt instruments must be settled before any discretionary spending. Bonuses, perks, equity options. The bond wasn't just a paycheck, it was a fuse. Flash forward to now. 2 weeks out. The company's different on the surface, glass offices, kombucha on tap, Slack channels with emojis in the names, but rot still blooms under polish. Grant Delaney walks around like he's God's gift to financial modeling, talking about trimming the fat, while pocketing a 6-figure relocation bonus. He doesn't see it, doesn't feel it, but the old system still hums, still holds. That uptime? Still above 99.98%. 10 years. Clean. The bond's maturity notice arrived silently. Just a time-stamped email from a legal bot that probably hadn't been touched since Windows 8. No champagne. No headlines. Just an automated flag in Treasury's debt queue. $67 million, payable October 1st, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I walked into Nathan's office the morning it hit and found him watching the server metrics, calm as ever. He didn't gloat, didn't even smirk. How long have you known? I asked. He didn't take his eyes off the screen. Since they started measuring the wrong things. We sat in silence, watching a heartbeat graph pulse steady green across a decade-long dashboard. Most people don't realize legacy systems can kill you quietly. But Nathan's? It's about to scream. And Grant? That man doesn't even know the bomb is in his lap. Nathan always did things like he was folding a flag, slow, deliberate, and with a reverence the rest of us forgot to have. No grand speeches, no it's been an honor emails, no cardboard boxes of desk junk. Just a quiet shuffle of folders, an extra 5 minutes on the backup console, and a subtle change in his user logs that most IT managers wouldn't even catch. He started with the documentation. Not the flashy kind, this was the real stuff. Obscure automation triggers, buried runtime conditions, handwritten subroutines duct-taped into existence during the 2015 hardware refresh. He backed it all up twice, then once more onto a personal drive labeled simply, Contingency Delta. You'd think it was prepper paranoia if you didn't know Nathan. But he wasn't preparing for disaster. He was preparing for release. He submitted his resignation through the internal portal. No subject line. No caps. Just a polite note with a 2-week timestamp and a forwarded copy to HR's shared inbox, which, surprise, was on auto vacation because Karen from Benefits was in Aruba and nobody else wanted the hassle. They never responded. Never processed it. I heard later someone flagged it as a draft in error because, quote, Nathan doesn't seem like the type. That was the point. While HR played solitaire, Grant was busy redrawing the financial map like a bored god with a Sharpie. He called it restructuring for strategic elasticity. Whatever the hell that meant. What it meant in practice was that Nathan's department, already running skeleton tight, had its $12 million budget swept out from under it and funneled straight into the executive comp pool. You could practically hear the martini shakers clinking from here. Grant made the announcement in an all-hands call with a grin like he just invented compounding interest. We found some unused legacy budgets. Dead weight? Really? And reallocated that toward rewarding innovation at the top. He winked like he was doing us all a favor. He never once asked what legacy meant in that sentence. Buried in the back of a locked compliance drive, one Nathan still had access to, was the original disbursement order from 2013. Clause 18b. Wasn't just a suggestion. It was legally binding. Any performance-based debt instruments had to be fulfilled before a single penny touched discretionary outflows. And Grant? That smug bastard never even opened the PDF. He couldn't have known that the second he moved that $12 million toward bonuses, he triggered a paper trail so damning even the SEC would need oven mitts to handle it. He was too busy modeling his bonus pool on a color-coded dashboard that sparkled like a Christmas ad. Efficiency, he called it. But all he'd done was tighten the noose and stick his own neck in. Nathan continued his quiet exit, cleared his inbox, transferred login credentials, left a USB in my drawer labeled Final Sys Image, Age locked. I asked him what it was for. He just said, in case they try to blame the system instead of the men who broke it. The logs? Secure. The metrics? Locked. The automation trigger for the bond? Already pre-verified and timestamped by Treasury's own compliance scheduler. All Nathan had to do now was wait. And the best part? Grant had no clue the infrastructure he was gutting was the same one legally holding his bonus hostage. The alert hit Nathan's phone at exactly 9 a.m., September 18th. No fanfare. Just a soft ping and a gray banner. Bond vests. 12 p.m., October 1st. He tapped it once, dismissed it, and went back to sipping black coffee from a chipped mug that read, "Uptime never sleeps." The irony wasn't lost on him. He didn't rush. He never did. That morning, while the rest of the office was foaming at the mouth over Q4 projections and some meaningless partnership press release, Nathan quietly opened a terminal window, authenticated with a legacy token, and pulled the full performance logs from the ORMF system. 10 years of uptime, logged to the millisecond. The number at the bottom didn't blink. 99.9893%. Clean. Verified. Immutable. He uploaded the file to the legal server, dropped it into the escrow-flagged contract folder, and ran a final checksum against the bond trigger protocol. The code wasn't flashy, just a quiet snippet of automation that would pull from Treasury's liquidity reserve, execute the debt payment, and file the compliance report with the SEC. The whole thing lived in a forgotten corner of the infrastructure Git, untouched since 2014. Grant wouldn't even know where to start looking for it. Still, Nathan called his attorney. Not to brag, just to confirm. "Shelley," he said, voice calm as always, "just checking, Clause 18b still stands, correct?" Her answer was immediate. "Yes. If they pay discretionary bonuses before the bond is fulfilled, they'll be in violation of both SEC rules and the internal disbursement hierarchy. The payment must clear first. No wiggle room." "Good," he said. "The system will take care of the rest. Should I prepare for escalation?" He paused. "I don't think escalation will be necessary. They've already signed everything that matters." The structure was intact. His part was done. In another part of the building, Grant was posing for the company newsletter, flanked by his entourage of yes-men and LinkedIn power smilers. They were finalizing bonus allocations, talking about Q3 windfalls, ordering lobster sliders for an off-site leadership picnic. Grant made a toast with kombucha about leveraging legacy capital into modern efficiency. He'd sent final figures to Treasury that morning. Money pulled from the exact fund that Nathan's bond was tied to. But Nathan didn't care about the optics. He wasn't after humiliation. That was the amateur's game. This wasn't revenge. It was math. October 1st would arrive. The system would do what it was built to do, prioritize stability, enforce order, process obligations. The bond would vest. Treasury would execute. And every shiny spreadsheet Grant had cooked up would fracture on contact with reality. Nathan stepped out for lunch that day. No stress. No phone. Just a quiet walk to the park, like it was any other Tuesday. The wind was crisp, and the leaves were starting to turn. 10 years ago, during the worst financial quarter of his life, he'd bet on infrastructure over charisma. He'd bet on uptime, not applause. He'd bet on the fine print. And now the fine print was counting down to detonation. At 11:59 a.m. on October 1st, Treasury began their usual quarterly ballet, buttoned up, caffeine-charged, and just smug enough to think this one would go smoothly. They hit send on a batch of bonus wire transfers, scheduled to land in 32 executive accounts by noon. The amounts were obscene. Mid-six figures for some. One exec, Grant's pet product director, was slated for an innovation stipend, so bloated it could have bailed out a regional bank. What no one noticed, not even the smug kid in Treasury with the limited edition Yeezys, was that something else had quietly joined the queue. A protocol buried behind 3 layers of legal infrastructure, time-stamped and validated 2 weeks ago by a server Nathan had personally audited. At exactly 12 p.m. on the dot, that line of code stirred to life. It didn't blink. It didn't warn. Just executed. The command originated from ORMF Legal Delta, a node forgotten by all but one person. It reached into the debt priority ledger, verified the conditions one last time, performance metrics, met, maturity date today, and released a single non-negotiable instruction. Transfer $67 million to bondholder account number 457981, Settlement class. Priority disbursement A. At 12:01 p.m. the transfer cleared. And at 12:02 p.m., Treasury's dashboard began vomiting red flags. The first was subtle. Insufficient funds. Grant Delaney. Q4 bonus disbursement failed. Then came the ripple. One by one, the wires queued for the executive bonus pool began auto-reversing, flagged as violations of disbursement hierarchy. Treasury analysts scrambled, thinking it was a system glitch. They tried resending. Blocked. They called IT. IT ran diagnostics. The logs pointed back to a non-editable script labeled simply Bond. They followed the audit trail to legal, who pulled the archived bond agreement and immediately paled. Clause 18. Be any discretionary distributions scheduled prior to satisfaction of bondholder payment shall be nullified and reported for compliance review. Which meant not only were the bonus wires dead, they were now flagged for SEC audit. Grant barged into Treasury red-faced, shouting questions no one could answer. Who approved this? Why didn't anyone catch it? What even is this bond? The Treasury lead, a woman who'd started 2 years ago, looked up with the grim realization still settling in her bones. It predates our whole team. It's tied to infrastructure stability, and it's valid. Grant demanded a direct call to Nathan. They tried. Voicemail. They emailed. Auto-reply. This inbox is no longer monitored. By 12:05 p.m., the company's internal bonus dashboard was locked. Legal froze all discretionary accounts pending investigation. One senior executive's assistant cried after seeing her boss's luxury retreat deposit bounce. The trap had sprung. 10 years of meticulous silence detonated in under 3 minutes. And Nathan? He was unreachable. Somewhere downtown he was probably ordering lunch. Maybe feeding ducks in the park. Maybe reading a paperback while the world he used to prop up with duct tape and foresight unraveled in a boardroom of people who thought bonuses were entitlements and infrastructure was just tech stuff. He didn't need to lift a finger. The code did it for him. Started with a ping. Then another. Then 30. By 12:07 p.m., the finance floor looked like a hostage situation, except the gun was a clause no one remembered signing, and the ransom had already cleared. Grant stormed into the Treasury bullpen like a man with a firecracker up his ass, screaming about rogue code and unauthorized fund blocks, demanding anyone, fix it before the board saw the reversal logs. He kept saying the same thing like it would change reality. It's just a bonus reallocation. It's not like we stole anything. No one responded. Eyes were glued to terminals. Slack was a graveyard of panicked DMs and system alerts. Legal had just pushed through a red banner update across the dashboard. Warning Clause 18B triggered. Priority bond disbursement executed. All discretionary funds frozen pending review. A junior analyst, probably too young to remember fidget spinners, let alone the 2013 liquidity crisis, muttered, "Wait. What's Clause 18B?" Silence fell. Someone from compliance, a woman who looked like she aged 5 years since breakfast, answered, "It's from the legacy bond program. The ones they issued during the stabilization campaign. Back when they were begging employees not to walk." The CFO, Mark Trenton, 3 months into the role, all flash and no flash drive, was pale. He'd been in the middle of prepping a keynote slide for the next earnings call about executive consistency during macro volatility. Now his voice cracked as he whispered, "This bond predates our entire legal team." It was true. Most of them weren't even in the industry back then. The only person who'd been there? Nathan Cole. And he wasn't answering emails. The implications hit like a truck. Grant's entire retention initiative, the Q4 bonus rollout, the equity refresh, the C-suite perk packages, all of it had been structured around discretionary capital. And now that capital had been legally drained before a single one of them saw a dime. Even worse, the system had auto-flagged every pending bonus as a compliance breach. The SEC review queue had triggered automatically, meaning best-case scenario, they were in for a full audit. Worst case, class action territory from shareholders if anyone tried to cover it up. Grant finally screamed, "Get me Nathan Cole. Now." The room froze again. Legal rep, older guy, sleeves rolled up like he knew what was coming, didn't even look up from the folder in his lap. He just sat flat and clean. He's no longer with us. Grant blinked. What do you mean? He's what, on vacation? No, the lawyer looked up now. He resigned. 2 weeks ago. HR never processed it. We only found the notice an hour ago. It was buried in the shared inbox. Grant's mouth opened, but nothing came out. He looked like a man realizing the trapdoor he'd laughed at was under his own feet. He tried one last play, stormed out, phone in hand, dialing Nathan directly. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. On the third try, he left a message. His voice cracked somewhere between bravado and begging. Nathan, this is Grant. Listen, we need to talk. Something happened with the disbursement and, we just need clarity, okay? Call me back. Nathan never did. Because Nathan wasn't waiting to be called. He'd already spoken. And his voice had come through in the only language Grant ever respected. Money. The boardroom smelled like fear and overpriced cologne. They'd called an emergency meeting the moment the wires failed and the SEC notification pinged. Mahogany table, 13 seats, 12 of them filled with furious, corner-cutting royalty now realizing someone had lit a fuse 10 years ago. And it was timed perfectly to detonate under their quarterly projections. The chair opened with a flat, "Let's get to the point." No handshakes. No coffee service. Just red folders marked confidential and eyes already bloodshot from combing through legalese none of them remembered authorizing. Legal began with the basics. The debt schedule, ratified in Q4 of 2013, includes a high-risk performance bond tied to the operations risk mitigation framework. Clause 18b was embedded in the disbursement protocol, requiring this bond be fulfilled prior to any discretionary disbursements, including bonuses and equity refreshes. He flipped a page. Today, at exactly 12 p.m., the maturity protocol was triggered. The bond executed at 12:01. The amount, $67 million, was transferred in compliance with the contract. Our discretionary funds, having been allocated without honoring that order, were subsequently flagged for financial violation and are now under mandatory review. The air went thin. Board member number 3, mid-60s, ex-military, known for his temper and his love of the word optics, slammed a hand on the table. Why didn't we know about this bond? Another voice followed. Harsher, female, razor-sharp. Who signed off on the reallocation without checking for senior debt instruments. All eyes turned to the CFO. Mark Trenton cleared his throat, looking like a man standing on a frozen lake and hearing the first crack. It was noted in legacy documentation, he said quietly. We assumed the bond wouldn't vest. Frankly, we believed the employee had retired before eligibility. The chair narrowed his gaze. Which employee? Mark hesitated. Nathan Cole. The name dropped like a tombstone. Someone muttered, Jesus. The board had always known of Nathan, the ghost in the system, the guy who kept the lights on. But nobody had ever really looked at him. Not until now. Not until he'd effectively drained their bonus pool with a single automated script. Grant Delaney sat at the far end of the table, arms folded, trying to look composed, but sweat was starting to seep through his collar. One director turned directly to him. You told us the bonus schedule was clean. You reallocated legacy ops funding. I was told his department was dormant, Grant stammered. I didn't know about any bond. Because you didn't check, someone snapped. The chair's voice cut through the room. Leave us, Mr. Delaney. What? Grant blinked. You can't be serious. I've been here 6 months, how was I supposed to? You'll be informed of next steps via counsel. He stood, hesitated, then left, the door clicking shut behind him like the seal on a vault. 2 floors down in a quiet consulting office, Nathan's phone lit up. He saw the number. Let it ring once, twice, then picked up. Long pause. No greeting. On the other end, a voice said, hoarse and unsure. Nathan, what the hell did you do? Nathan's tone was calm, unbothered. You wanted to cut costs, he said. The debt was the cost. You just ignored the line item. Then he hung up. The room was smaller than you'd think for something that heavy. No windows. Just a table, a pitcher of water, and the weight of a $67 million miscalculation echoing off the drywall. Nathan sat opposite 2 company attorneys and a neutral mediator from the Compliance Oversight Board. His tie was loose, sleeves rolled, voice low. Like he was reciting a grocery list instead of unraveling a corporate failure in real time. The deposition had one goal: containment. The company's legal team wanted to preempt regulatory backlash by getting ahead of the narrative. An isolated incident, they'd call it. Overlooked clause. Misinterpreted documentation. Nothing malicious. Nothing structural. Nathan was cordial, cooperative, but not forgiving. They asked about the bond's origin. He explained it with the same calm he used when fixing cascading system failures at 3 a.m., just the facts. The performance metrics. The legal trigger. The automatic payout mechanism tied to uptime data and timestamped logs. All reviewed, validated, and submitted within regulatory protocol. No loopholes. No tricks. Just truth that nobody wanted to read until it emptied their coffers. The mediator finally asked, "What outcome are you seeking?" Nathan didn't blink. "A public compliance correction," he said. Acknowledgement that the clause was valid, that the payout was contractual, not punitive. The lawyers shifted uncomfortably. "Is that all?" "That's all," he said. "This was never about revenge." They agreed. The company issued a quiet compliance bulletin 2 days later. Standard corporate fare, 3 paragraphs buried under a policy update subject line. But the right people read it. The SEC flagged it as evidence of internal oversight failure. Investor confidence dipped. Not a collapse, but enough to shave the polish off Grant's Q4 projections. Speaking of Grant, he didn't survive the audit. Once legal confirmed he'd approved discretionary payouts despite having authority over budget allocations, they invoked his contract's cause termination clause. No severance. No stock acceleration. No retirement package. One day he was the shiny new VP on a tear. The next, his name vanished from the company directory like it had never existed. Nathan never spoke about it publicly. He didn't brag. Didn't tweet. Didn't call a reporter or leak an email. But I know he saw the final board memo. We were on a call when it hit. I asked if he wanted a copy. He said no. Then after a pause he added, "I told them. The systems were stable. The people weren't." Now, Nathan works out of a quiet corner office in a financial watchdog firm. It's not glamorous, he never wanted that. But it's honest. He mentors junior compliance analysts now, teaches them to read every clause, to respect the architecture behind the numbers, to see contracts not as red tape but as infrastructure. He's the guy they call when the alarms don't make noise, just patterns. And every so often, when another company brushes off an old obligation as a rounding error, Nathan gets a familiar call. Calm, precise, just like him. And he answers. The office is quiet. Morning sun cuts across polished concrete and glass, casting sharp angles on clean desks and sharper minds. No pinging Slack notifications. No faux inspirational posters about synergy. Just the hum of real work. Slow, careful, essential. Nathan walks in wearing the same kind of muted blue shirt he always did. Still doesn't carry a laptop, he prefers paper. Red pen in his left breast pocket. Folded legal briefs in the crook of his arm. The sign on the door reads Ethics Infrastructure Advisory. Below it, Integrity in Design. Accountability by default. He nods to the front desk. Smiles at a new cohort of analysts gathered around a whiteboard full of phrases like contract precedence chain and default cascading liability. Most are barely 30. All hungry. But they listen when he speaks because unlike the think piece influencers and LinkedIn philosophers, Nathan doesn't posture. He teaches systems like they're living things, like they can be trusted, but only if you respect them. His office is glass-walled, unassuming. The only decoration, besides the server uptime graph he keeps printed and pinned behind the door, is a single black frame on his desk. Inside it, a clipped excerpt from a 2013 bond agreement. Due upon stability, $67 million. It's printed in plain 11-point font. No bold, no highlight. But it's the anchor of everything that followed. A reminder not of the money, but of the principle. That infrastructure isn't always code and hardware. Sometimes it's a line in a contract everyone else forgets to read. Mid-morning, one of the new hires, kid named Jalen, fresh from grad school, pokes his head in, eyes curious but cautious. "Hey, Nathan, that line on your desk. What was it for?" "Some kind of lawsuit." Nathan looks up from his notepad. A ghost of a grin. No lawsuit, he says. Just a rounding error. The kid laughs, confused, then disappears down the hall. Nathan leans back in his chair, sipping cold coffee from a plain mug. Outside, the city keeps moving, hustling, flashing, burning margins to impress people who'll never read the footnotes. But Nathan doesn't need the noise. He had his moment. Not on a stage. Not with headlines. Just with a line item they couldn't erase. Final voiceover, steady and clear. They thought I was invisible, but I was the invoice.